Hey guys, Mariko here, and for those of you that haven't been here before, I am a residential realtor with my team, Bridgewell Real Estate Group, and we are based out of the Greater Vancouver area of British Columbia, Canada, and welcome to the channel. Today's video, I am going to be talking about important changes to the Tenancy Act. There are key changes that have been made, specifically notices to end tenancy and how long that notice is. There's changes about the dispute periods. There's clarification on compensation for tenants. There's a new web portal, so there's lots to get into, and those changes were effective as of July 18th, 2024, which is literally today, the day that I'm filming this video. So it is going to apply to everybody in British Columbia that is selling a tenanted property, that is looking to occupy a tenanted property. And so this video will be covering pretty much everything that you need to know, along with examples as well. So just to start this video off, as you guys know, I try and provide as much information with regards to the real estate market, news updates, all that jazz. I am not a licensed property manager, so if you're looking for like advice on specific situations, or you've got a complex situation, or you're dealing with a dispute, please make sure that you are contacting the residential tenancy branch or looking for an actual property manager. And if you're looking for a reference for a property manager, we have great people that we work with. I can definitely pass along their information. But please just keep in mind, again, that this is just for informational purposes. It's not necessarily to be solely relied upon. And I am not a licensed property manager, but I do have a really great example for you that I vetted with a property manager. Again, we deal with this all the time. I am a landlord myself, and so I have that personal experience, and hopefully this video helps. So let's just get into it. So starting off with the key changes to the Residential Tenancy Act, number one is definitely increasing the notice period that a landlord has to give a tenant to end that tenancy. And this is split out into two different timelines. Number one, if it's for a real estate purchase where that purchaser, the buyer, is giving notice to the landlord to have the property be vacant on their behalf, this is a 3-month window. And I'm gonna go through an example on exactly how that 3 months is calculated, but it's going from 2 months to 3 months. If you are a landlord that's looking to occupy the unit or the home for yourself or for a close family member, so not to do with a real estate purchase, then that 2-month period is now increased to 4 months. And that's definitely the biggest and most notable change, which I said I will get into examples for. Next is the dispute period. Again, it's separated out into is it a real estate transaction or is it a landlord looking to occupy? If it is a real estate transaction, then that notice period has gone from a 15-day where a tenant can dispute this notice to a 21-day period that they can dispute the notice once it's given. But again, if it's a landlord looking to occupy or their close family member looking to occupy, then that 15-day period has increased to 30 days. Another key change is that the individual moving into the property must intend to live there for at least 12 months, and this is compared to a previous 6-month period. In the event that the individual is found to be breaking this tenancy in bad faith, they could also be ordered to pay the displaced tenant up to 12 months rent. And last but not least, the landlords will also be required to generate their new notices to end tenancy through a web portal. That web portal will provide those notices, it will have information, and it will also give landlords access to information about the compensation that's required for the last month's free rent portion for the tenant. So whether you are selling a tenanted property, buying a tenanted property, you're a landlord or a tenant, there are definitely some key considerations that you have to think of when you are dealing with notices or just the process in general. So number one is definitely how the tenancy is structured. So is it a month-to-month tenancy or is it a fixed term tenancy? Next, if you are selling the property, you really need to think about how you can give notice and when you can give notice, because there's lots of rules around this that people mess up. Next, if you are purchasing the property, you need to consider whether or not this is an investment property, in which case you actually have to take over the tenant, which I'll get into, or if you are looking to occupy the tenancy, then that's where all of these rules around how you end notice and when you can get access to that property are different. And then last is this a landlord or a close family member moving in? Then again, we're working off a different set of rules. So going into these key considerations really quickly, starting off with fixed versus month-to-month tenancy, what you really need to consider here is just like when you can move in, and just understand that notice is required for both types of tenancies, whether that be fixed or month-to-month. I'm going to get into examples for both of these later, just so that you understand like how notice is given and how long it needs to be for. But just understand that like month-to-month tenancies, there's a little bit more flexibility because they are on a month-to-month basis and proper notice just needs to be given. Whereas with a fixed term tenancy, it's very common for those to be like 1 year periods, sometimes even 2 year periods. So you just need to be aware of when the end date is for that fixed tenancy, but still make sure that you're giving proper notice accordingly. So next, when you go to sell a property, you really need to consider when you can give the notice and what you can and cannot do. So first, understanding that it's actually the buyer that gives you the notice to say that they intend to occupy that property in good faith. And that's when you can give that 3-month notice period, which I'm going to get into the example for later. But if the buyer actually ends up being an investor, then technically they have to take that tenant over. So you cannot just list your property and say, hey, you got to be out, I'm giving you notice. It doesn't work like that. It's the buyer that has to give notice and state whether or not they intend to occupy that property in good faith. So definitely just keep that in mind, that you can only give notice once notice has been given to you from the buyer, and that this can only be done after you have a firm deal. So once you have an accepted offer, subjects are removed, and the deposit has been handed in. So just building on that, when we are looking to purchase a property, we need to consider whether or not it's an investment or to occupy. And so again, when it's an investment property, you have to take over that tenancy, and you can't just bump up the rent, you can't just do whatever you want. So make sure you're aware of how much the tenant is paying, whether they're month to month or a fixed tenancy, who they are, all of those things that you would typically ask when you are interviewing for a new tenant. And if you're not looking to take over a tenancy, then just be aware that as an investor, you should probably be focusing more on vacant or owner-occupied properties, so you can pick your own person moving forward. Now, if you are looking to purchase the property and occupy it, that's a different story, right? Because you can give that notice to end tenancy within that proper 3-month period that now applies. Lastly, if you are a landlord or you have a close family member looking to move in, just make sure that you're aware of what a close family member definition is as per the Residential Tenancy Act, because close is subjective and it might have different meanings for different people, but like it has to be as close as like a spouse, a child, like that kind of thing. It can't be a niece or a cousin, so just make sure to check out that definition. And again, we're not working off a 3-month period because it's not a real estate purchaser that's giving that notice. When it's a landlord or a close family member, we're working off a different timeline. It's a 4-month notice period. So getting into our first example, this is going to be a month-to-month tenancy situation where it's a purchaser that's going to be giving notice to occupy the unit in good faith, and rent is due on the 1st of the month. So I'm going to go through the old way, which is 2 months notice, and then I'm also going to go through the new way, which is effective as of August 21st, which is 3 months notice. And so starting off with how it was done previously, again, we can only give that notice once the deal has gone firm. So let's assume that the firm date is August 21st. Now, it's not just like 2 months from August 21st. It's 2 months from the next effective day. And so the effective day is always going to be the next day that the tenant pays rent. So in this example, I've used rent on the 1st of the month. So that means that this 2-month notice period is not actually going to be effective until September 1st. So now the tenant had previously in this old way, all of September, all of October as the 2-month period. They didn't need to move out until October 31st at the latest, and the purchaser could have the unit for possession as early as November 1st. This is the old way of doing it. Now, with the new way of doing it, it's a 3-month period. So again, same thing, it's firm on August 21st. The effective day is going to be September 1st. So now all of September, all of October, all of November, the tenant now has a 3-month period from the effective day to move out. they don't need to be out of the place until November 30th in this example, and the buyer could have possession as early as December 1st. So it just gives tenants a little bit more time to be able to find a new place with this 3-month notice period. So just to avoid any confusion, I'm going to change this up a little bit, and let's say that rent was due on the 15th of the month, okay? So let's just ignore this 2-month period because it doesn't apply anymore. But if we take the new 3-month period, right, let's change this. So September 15th, October 15th, November 15th, and December 15th. So what happens? August 21st comes around. That's when you have the firm deal. We have to go based on the effective day. So the next effective day is until September 15th. So again, September 15th to October 15th, November 15th, December 15th. That's the 3-month period. But you can see that in this example, because we had just passed a fairly recent effective day, this actually ends up almost being 4 months. And this is really important to be aware of. Again, it's not just like 3 months to the date that it goes firm, it's 3 months from the next effective day. So just keep in mind that a lot of the times these rate holds start when you finalize your pre-approval, and your completion has to be within that 120-day period. So know when your rate hold expires and make sure that you're keeping this time frame in mind, whether it be, close to the effective date or a little bit longer, like more of a 4-month period. It's just important for you to know. There are definitely options for you to take over the tenancy and complete a little bit earlier if you are concerned about your rate hold, but just know that there could be mortgage implications, tax implications, because technically you're taking over the tenancy, so it's an investment property for a shorter period of time. So definitely make sure to consult a professional before you contractually commit to doing something like that. Again, like these rate holds and stuff like that, it's not really a huge concern if rates are going down, because you could just get a lower rate or reassess like within an appropriate completion period of time. But it's more of a concern if rates are going up and you actually want to secure that rate hold that you got for that 120-day period. So let's take a different situation where we're working with a fixed term tenancy. So again, these are lease periods that are committed to a particular date, and we need to be aware of that date, but we still need to give notice. So again, if we're working off a purchaser situation, we still have to give that 3-month notice period. So let's take this same situation, right? But let's actually say that, I'm going to go back to the first example, right? Let's say that the fixed lease is until January 1st, right? So even though you're giving notice, even though you're giving that 3 months notice here, because the 1-year lease doesn't expire until January 1st, the tenant is still allowed to be here until January 1st. This notice period is just saying that you are giving notice, telling them that they have to be out at this period of time. A lot of people make the mistake thinking that fixed term tenancies are like, okay, that date that we agreed to the tenancy ending, it's done and they're just out of that time, I don't need to give notice. But that's absolutely not correct. You still need to give notice, because fixed term tenancies automatically roll over into a month-to-month tenancy, even if a new lease has not been started. So once that tenancy date is up, you can either start a new fixed lease or it automatically goes over month to month. So again, if their fixed term tenancy ends on January 1st, that means that you just have to be giving notice, acknowledged no later than October 1st in this situation, because it's 1, 2, 3, and they have to be out by no later than December 31st. So let's change this up and say that you are a landlord looking to occupy the property yourself, okay? And you're going to occupy. So because we are not dealing with a purchaser, the notice period is different. So the old way was 2 months, everything was just 2 months before. But now, if you are a landlord situation, this is actually a 4-month notice period from the next effective day. So because you are a landlord looking to occupy it, there's no firm deal, right? There's nobody, no buyer giving notice on behalf of anyone. You're the one that's giving notice. So let's still say that you give notice saying that you intend to occupy the unit. You give that notice on August 21st. Same thing, rent's due on the 1st of the month, that's going to be effective on September 1st. But now you're working off 1, 2, 3, 4 months notice, and the tenant has to leave no later than December 31st. So you can start to occupy the property on January 1st. So this is the big difference between the notice periods, and this is why I told you to keep in mind. Is it a purchaser that's giving notice and looking to occupy the unit, or is it a landlord that's giving notice for themselves or a close family member to occupy the unit? Because you're going to have a 3-month period for a purchaser or real estate transaction, but a 4-month period for a situation like this. So I just want to give some final thoughts on things to consider when you are giving that notice. Number one being the compensation for last month's free rent. And again, on the new web portal, this is going to be something that is made known to landlords so that they're aware of the situation and what the tenant's rights are for this. But essentially, when you are giving a notice to end tenancy, whether that be on behalf of a purchaser or yourself, there's this last month's free rent that is going to apply. So you, as a landlord, are going to have to factor in a period where you're likely paying your mortgage and the costs associated to the property, but you are not getting rent from that tenant. And so in this situation, when we take the 4 months notice, December would basically be free. So the tenant can choose to stay there for free up until December 31st and not pay you rent. Or if they've paid rent and they end up moving out earlier, let's say they end up moving out on December 15th, you still have to give them compensation for their last month's free rent. So make sure you either have money that is liquid to give them in case they did pay rent, or have money set aside to make sure that you can cover your last month's free rent compensation. Another thing to keep in mind is that even though you've given this notice, technically the tenants don't have to stay until the end of that period. They can give 10 days notice to tell you that they're moving out at an earlier date. And even if they do that, again, the last month's rent portion still applies. So make sure you have that money ready to go. And the last tidbit, pro tip that I want to leave you with is that if you are a purchaser that's looking to take over the tenancy for rate hold reasons, like you just really need to complete by a period of time, make sure that you are also factoring in last month's rent. Because if you're the landlord and you're taking over that last month, you're the one that's going to have to pay that. So you should be making sure that you have worked into your contract that the landlord is going to credit you the amount for whatever last month's rent is. You should also be getting the security or any pet deposits that were given so that you can return those to the tenants when they leave and that tenancy essentially has officially ended. So definitely make sure that you are doing that, especially if you are taking over a tenancy and are looking to occupy the unit. But even if you are an investor, obviously you're taking over that tenancy, so that last month's free rent wouldn't really apply. But make sure that you get those credits for the security and pet deposit and that you have all of your ducks in line to take over that tenancy and have that properly set up. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope that you learned everything that you need to know about residential tenancies and how the changes effective as of July 18th are going to affect both buyers, sellers, and tenants alike. If you do have specific questions to like a scenario that you are experiencing, again, you can reach out to the residential tenancy branch or possibly look into contacting a property manager specifically. Again, my name is Mariko and I am a residential realtor, so I help clients buy, sell, invest, all that jazz in the Greater Vancouver and Fraser Valley areas. So if you are looking to purchase a property, sell a property, anything, definitely feel free to reach out to myself and my team. If you like this video, of course, like it. Please subscribe to our channel so that we can make sure that we're providing you up-to-date information and that you're in the loop. And if you have any requests for videos that you want me to do in the future, leave a comment down below and I'll try my best to cover it in recent time. So thanks so much again for watching, guys, and I hope you have a really great day.